So CNN has a very distinguished history of hiring race baiters and horrible human beings and paying them to come on and give us their opinions. They did it most recently with Corey Lewandowski. They who was the front man. He was the body man. He was the muscle guy for a fascist, racist, misogynistic creep. They're like who also, by the way, battered reporters. And they're like, hey, you know what? You're out of a job. We'll hire you. We're a news network. You don't like news? Come on. You like anyway. They also hired that guy Jeffrey Lord to stand up for racists, and now they got this guy Harry Houck. He's a former NYPD detective. Here he is, and they were on. He was on discussing the problem of policing in America in light of Baton Rouge and Minnesota killings, right, and which were horrific. And so here he is. He's going to give us what he thinks is the problem with policing in America. It's not that police are racists. Right? It's this.
But to come out with the rhetoric that the police officers were racist when there's no evidence to indicate that racism was involved has got to stop.
So he's saying that calling out racism has got to stop, but not racism itself. Just the calling out of racism has got to stop. That's what he just said. The calling out, again, we're a nation of adult children of alcoholics. It's not the problem. It's the guy who points out what a problem is that we got to get to shut up. He's got more to say.
If that doesn't stop, and this thing about the disparity of blacks and whites in jails, that's got to stop, because I got statistics.
He doesn't say the disparity of blacks and whites in jails has to stop. He means that us mentioning it has to stop. He's being paid by CNN for his opinion. This is an opinion CNN feels the world needs to hear. He's saying that people calling out racism in policing and racism in our criminal justice system has to stop. Okay.
Right here, which will prove me right.
So he's got statistics right now. They're going to prove to you that cops aren't racist. You ready?
New York City alone, okay? Blacks are 23%. They make up
of the population.
Right, of the population. 75% of all shootings, 70% of all robberies, and 60% of all violent crimes. All right? The whites, only 3%. Now, that is why.
Now, again, they're not policed on Wall Street. If this guy would go to Wall Street and see if he concludes that whites are more prone to crime, because he would, because that's where all the real crime is happening in New York City. It's happening on Wall Street, and he's yelling about black on black crime. Okay, here we go.
There were more blacks in jail than there are whites.
But that's okay.
And he says that's proof that blacks are more prone to crime because there's more blacks in jail. It's got nothing to do. Again, there's no institutional race. He doesn't look at those statistics and go, oh, wow, there's some institutional racism happening. When he looks at this, he goes, oh, look, they're criminals. They're born that way. They're born that way. And he's a cop. And you understand why black people don't trust cops? I got a problem. I'm going to call a guy who thinks I'm already a criminal.
Just finish here and then you go, all right? So we look at that statistic, all right? They turn it around. You know, the racial demagogues out there turn it around that the blacks are being picked on. It's not.
So he just said, oh, the racial demagogues are now turning this around by saying that blacks are being picked on just because they're incarcerated at 10 times higher their population rates. He's saying that, pointing out racism again, you're the demagogue. That's the pot calling the kettle more prone to crime. This is a cop who's brought on to give his opinion about policing. This is this guy.
Facts and these statistics, all right, have to be addressed, and you've got to understand them.
But both can be true, right? Both can be true. You wind up dealing with a community more because of socioeconomics and criminality, but the question still remains, Mark, of how you deal with that.
So there's Chris Cuomo doing half of a good job by trying to point out, yeah, those statistics, you're only giving one part. There's a reason why there's those statistics. because black neighborhoods are over-policed. We now know that. And if you look at our other video about the broken windows bullshit policing theory that's been operating in New York City for the last 15 years, or 20, you'll understand. They over-police black neighborhoods. We all know this now. We all know that they're racist. We all know the criminal. Even Republicans are noticing. Rand Paul is calling it out. Newt Gingrich has said things about, we all have to understand that this is the legacy of slavery. We all have to understand. No, not this cop. This cop, like, no, blacks, I got the statistics. Blacks are criminals. That's what he's saying.
But to come out with the rhetoric that the police officers were racist when there's no evidence to indicate that racism was involved.
No, there's no evidence that race was involved in those white guys killing those black guys. So what he's saying, there's no evidence of racism. So apparently the victim's black skin was planted or he didn't have black skin.
But the question still remains, Mark, of how you deal with that community.
Right. Can I respond to Harry?
Please.
Okay. So
please, and then I'm coming to you,
Jeff.
Okay.
There's a couple things there. First, Harry talked about the idea of people immediately second-guessing the police. The police should be second-guessed. They're public servants, and we're the public. We should be second-guessing them, just like we should second-guess our politicians.
He's saying don't automatically infer an assumption of racism. That's what he's saying.
Well, that's not what he said, but and we have to make that distinction, right? We have to make the distinction.
Right.
Should be subject to scrutiny, but so long as police have not been, and because police have not been, sometimes at this point, police are frustrated when you don't take their word as gospel right away. With camera phone technology, increased witness technology, we see that they're not always telling the truth. Now, to Terry's second point, which is that in Ferguson, we immediately jumped up and said this is racism without any evidence of racism. We did an investigation of the Ferguson Police Department. I talk about this in my new book. And there is considerable evidence of racism in Ferguson. So it isn't true that there was no evidence of racism. There were racist emails, racist phone calls, racist practices.
He's saying in this specific incident.
No, but
why is Cuomo continuing to interrupt this guy as he places?
So let's watch the cop.
I believe that we're racist, correct?
But Harry, there's only 40
emails.
Harry, there's only like 100.
It doesn't matter.
But Harry, hold on.
That means it's systemic.
Guys.
Harry stood on national TV and just said that black people are prone to criminality. I wouldn't be able to respond to that. Okay.
Well, they are.
But you think?
So there it is. He just said it. First of all, he dismissed racism in Ferguson, even though the guy sitting next to him just wrote a book about it and said, of course, we found many instances of racism. And he's saying a couple of emails. What's the big deal? This is a cop who's being paid by CNN for his opinion. He represents cops, a retired New York City cop. And here he is to give his opinion. And by the way, he's not in the CIA or the FBI because he didn't go to college, this cop. I'm going to guess if he went to college, that'll be a shock because he would probably have applied for the FBI or CIA, which he didn't. So he's sitting there saying there is no racism in Ferguson. That's what he's saying. We're going to get to that.
You are prone to criminality?
And by the way, you just said that blacks are more prone to be criminals, and he said they are. That just happened on a news show on CNN. Someone they pay for his informed opinion on policing just came on to say, what are the most racist things you could say as a policeman? That blacks are more prone to crime. And then he's digging in his heels and backing. I have statistics. You can't lie. More blacks are in jail. Hey, do you see all the blacks we arrested? It has nothing to do with the fact that we have a racist policing system in theory. The stupid bullshit broken windows where we terrorize black and brown people. We've already proven that was bullshit. We've already proven that. So here, with a little bit more to say.
Statistics here show this.
You don't mean to say that. I'm going to give you a chance to correct it. You don't mean that black people are prone to criminality.
What does this say?
I don't know what that says, but I know.
The chief can back me up because he's coming out.
He's not going to stay on national TV and say black people are prone to criminality.
I am telling you, 75% of all shootings are black.
Not only is he going to say it, he's going to scream it at the top of his lungs. And you think he got fired from CNN? No. I wonder if he got a raise, because that's what they want. They like race baiters to come on and say horrible things that debase our culture and demean us, and then it gets ratings, so they make more money. That's why you know that's how TV people think. It gets hey that guy who assaulted that female reporter and works for that fascist Donald Trump, the racist. Hey, is he available? Can we get him? Let's pay him some money because people need to hear his opinion. Hey, there's some cop who believes that most blacks are more prone to crime because of their black skin. Let's get him on. Let's give him some money. Let's have him talk. This is your news. This is CNN. How is CNN better than Fox? How? This is unbelievable.
I'm hoping you just don't know.
75% of shooters. What you're doing is you're interpreting something else I'm saying. Your narrative. That's what you do.
I'm just trying to talk.
Mark, hold on one second. Hold on.
I think you just don't know prone.
Points I'd like to make. First of all, I'm not going to say
points.
prone to blacks, prone to crime because I don't believe it, and it's not true. That's the first.
It's not true. It's racist.
The second thing, I have a slight difference.
It is not racist.
To say that black people are prone to criminality.
That's not what I said. I said 75% of the shootings that occur in New York City are done by blacks. All right? And you keep on talking about this disproportionate amount of whites and blacks in jail.
Because it is
and this is
disproportionate.
why. No, it's not.
No.
It is, yeah, by the definition, it is.
How about we don't yell?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to say.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, let's not yell. Let's say all the horrible, ugly, racist, ignorant, backwards stuff you could possibly think. Let's give no context to any of the racist statistics we're going to give. Let's do none of, but let's not yell. Let's make sure we don't yell. You should yell. You should yell when someone, in a very calm manner, in a very sober way, who's brought on as an expert and starts spewing racist garbage. You're supposed to get upset. If you don't get upset now, when do you get upset? When do you get upset? People say to me often, Jimmy, this stuff really gets you upset, doesn't it? I go, I know. I try to save my anger for important things, like sporting events and Hollywood award shows. This is what you're supposed to be upset about. And CNN, the biggest thing right now is Chris Cuomo wants to make sure nobody's yelling. And just to give you some statistics about this bonehead cop, he's a racist. He doesn't know it. He thinks this is just statistics. I don't know, because he doesn't know black people except to arrest them. He doesn't know. This is the guy. And he was a cop his whole life. This guy. So if you're a black person in New York City, are you going to go to a cop when you need help? Hey, that guy who already thinks you're prone to crime. This guy, you're black. You're probably likely you're a criminal. I wonder why people don't trust the cops more. This is supposed to be their representative. This is supposed to be the smart guy. This is the smart guy from the NYPD. This is the smart guy. This is the guy. So the reality is that the black men are disproportionately targeted by police. And an ongoing tally from the Washington Post found that 40% of the unarmed men shot and killed by police last year were black. Unarmed. 40%. Which is weird because black men only account for 6% of the population. And now maybe you wonder why that happens. Because guys who are given a gun by the state already have in their head that black people are more prone to crime. They're criminals. And then they go out and sure enough, they see when they shoot him, he was a criminal. Why? How do I know? He was black. And how do I know that's true? The guy on CNN told me. He's got statistics. And they pay him to come on. Last year, the U.S. Justice Department investigation found that there was considerable evidence of racism in the Ferguson, Missouri Police Department. Considerable, not a little, not one or two emails, considerable. Ferguson, Missouri is a third white, population-wise, a third white, but the crime statistic compiled in the city over the past 2 years seemed to suggest that only black people were breaking the law. They accounted for 85% of the traffic stops, 90% of tickets, and 93% of arrests in Ferguson, even though they only make up a third of the population. In cases like jaywalking, which hinge on police discretion, blacks accounted for 95% of all arrests. So that's called a racist organization. And they were extracting wealth from the poor people, working people in Ferguson to fund their own racist organization of oppressing black people to get more money out of them to fund their own organization. And CNN doesn't know that, apparently. Apparently, Chris Cuomo can't stop the show and go, hey, I'm sorry. You're 100% wrong about that, buddy. 100% wrong. And I'm not going to let that kind of bullshit facts go flying out on my show, especially when it comes to a really important topic like policing in America and racism. In fact, what you just said was racist. And in fact, if you don't know that, that's what shows how broken policing is in America, that a guy comes on national television and screams at the top of his lungs at a retired cop in a suit in a news studio yelling that blacks are more prone to crime, and I've got the statistics to prove it. If blacks are in prison at a higher rate, it's because they're criminals. Nothing to do with the system. Nothing to do with the legacy of racism in America. Nothing to do with the fact that we just let blacks vote a generation ago. Nothing to do with that. So there you go. And you wonder why people get their news from YouTube.